because like it's not really a theories. It doesn't lend itself totally to theories as a series. You know what I mean? There's a couple things obviously, but I think they've all been kind of picked over. To me, it's like this catching all the symbolism and all the different like small little details to the show. Like that's why I rewatched it all the time.
Oh. Well, for example, let's go through what we want to do is pull up some of these theories online here, and just it'll open up. We know a lot about the Sopranos. It'll open up kind of like a box to things.
Well, let's start with a couple of like, how many times have you seen the series? You think all the way through, or just like thinking through?
I think about 4 times over.
Okay, I'm probably somewhere about 6 or 7, with some episodes that I've seen probably over 10 times.
I've definitely seen single episodes a lot.
Yeah. But like first season, and obviously the pilot, like I not only have like the script of the pilots, I think I got several copies of the script actually, because it's usually included in script books of The Sopranos. But I've got that. I've got actually the original one that his name is still Tommy Soprano in it. But I've watched that pilot like, I don't know, 20 times, something like that. And then probably through the series, 6 or 7. And then, a handful of episodes I've probably seen more than 10.
Which season do you think is your favorite?
That's a tough one. It's funny because like when I first watched 2, I wasn't a huge fan of 2, but like on the rewatch, I was like, oh, 2 is really strong. 2 is like almost as strong as the first season. I mean, it's always easy for me to rank the worst season, which is always 4, despite 4 having some good stuff. It's the only one that has like a bad episode in it, which is Christopher, which has got to be, I think, the series' biggest low point. But I mean, favorite season? 5's great. I really like 5. 5 has solid stuff in it.
2 is mine.
2? Yeah. 2's good. 2's surprisingly good. Richie's a really good villain.
Okay, I got one for you that I noticed, and it's that Richie is gay.
Yeah, I think that one is kind of slightly in there. Do you remember if there's a part in season 2 where he's getting a blowjob and then he's like, don't worry.
It's in my list here, yeah. So I'll run through a bunch of stuff that I noticed because I watched some stuff from season 2. So what I kind of get is that Richie is gay. He doesn't really want to be, and he's kind of mad at himself to an extent for being that way. And in some ways, he takes out his anger and rage and violence on other people, right? So Tony says, guys in the joint get a pass for that at one point to Melfi.
Yeah, much later,
when Janice is kind of having sex with Richie and faking it and kind of getting his head, he loses his heart on there and can't do it. He gets a blowjob with the lights off at the Bing. On his return, when he gets out of jail on his return, and the girl says, "You like the dark," and he goes, "Yeah, something like that."
Right. Okay. Yeah.
This is all in 2-3, by the way. And he says to Junior, "Put a shirt on. I'm getting a chubby." And now that can kind of go both ways, but it's layered anyway.
But it's not nothing. Yeah.
It's not nothing.
No.
It's to shine him on, but it also has more.
That's all I would say. Go on.
It's to shine him on, but it also has more underlying symbolism.
Yes.
And I think he's jealous to Beansy in some way, because Beansy says, "You got a hard on for me," and I don't know why. Right. And Christopher says the same thing. "You got a hard on for me at the poker game or whatever."
Yeah. He said, "I've got a hard on for you already."
Yeah. Like, raging hard on for
give
you.
Me a reason or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And Richie, the reason why I think Richie actually runs over Beansy, I think he's actually pissed because he says, "Why weren't you at the party?" I think he has a little bit of a crush on Beansy, and he's kind of picking on him because it's easy because Beansy wasn't there, and he can take out his rage on him a little bit.
Right. That's interesting.
And I think he's kind of jealous. He's like, "Why weren't you at the party?" Because Richie's all pissed.
Yeah. I'm surprised this wasn't more expressed. I mean, not only are those things, I think, relevant, but I've also read the notes that David Chase had that he wrote during the summer or whatever it was to make season 2. And one of them is about Richie being gay, that he had homosexual experiences in prison. Yeah. And that it had, either awakened something in him or just like he just wasn't the same person when he came out. And it wasn't able to come out. So
for sure. And so
I think they probably ditched it as a main plot, but they kept it as some small
it's like a subtle underlying thing that you got to be listening and looking for it to get it.
Totally.
But as soon as he had the lights off and he's like, "Yeah, something like that," I'm like, "Oh, yeah, for sure." Then there's another point. He meets Tony. He's causing Tony all these problems and meets Tony at the mall. but the shot opens with just Richie staring in front of a bunch of women's lingerie, just staring.
Right.
And Tony says, I'm the motherfucking fucking one who calls the shots. It's during that whole kind of exchange. Then in 2-5, Richie says, I thought a lot about it. People change. When he's talking about being with Janice and Tony confronting him at the house.
Yeah.
So Tony comes in, he's like, put some fucking pants on. And it's kind of interesting because Richie is Tony's rival in that season. And Richie is acting like Tony in that moment because he's at his house wearing the underwear, cooking breakfast, getting the newspaper. And Tony comes in, he's like, put some fucking pants on. And Richie doesn't do it.
But also, Tony says to him, they're better looking guys in the can than my sister. And he goes,
and that's when he says, exactly. And that's when he says, I thought a lot about it. People change. There are men better. There are men in the can better looking than my sister. He says, to each his own, Tony, to each his own.
I love he's standing with the fork. He's gripping the fork really high and there's like egg dripping off it and shit.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So that's the whole Richie being gay. And it's pretty confirmed.
Yeah, I'd say so. Not in any sort of like, that's one of the theories, I guess you could say, that were actually kind of like backed up. And the fact that David Chase wrote it down, they ditched it as a main plot, and then obviously took it up again slightly with Vito.
Yeah, I think they flushed it out with Vito later on.
That's interesting. Now that I'm thinking about so many things with Richie, because like I looked for little things after I read that about that David Soprano had written that, but I didn't quite put it all together. That was just a subtle detail. But yeah, I'm on board with that.
The most recent one I really of that kind of portion with the whole Richie, the most recent thing I kind of came up with was the jealousy of Beansy kind of thing. Because I was like, why did he go after Beansy? Just because he was an easy mark or something? But I think he was kind of looking at Beansy and he's like, here's this fucking guy and he's got these things, but maybe he has a little bit of a crush on him too or something. And that's a way to take out some possible
rage. I wouldn't have, even now, like I'm not super buying that one, only because I don't quite get the
just when he says, why weren't you at the party? That's the line that, because I was like, he's so angry. It's almost like he was, because he's sitting there moping.
He's actually hurt by it.
He's hurt.
Yeah.
Because it seems like Beansy's the only person he's thinking about.
Yeah, that is interesting. And he goes after him almost like a scorned lover.
Yeah.
In a sense, like it's so disproportionate.
I think there's some jealousy and feelings or something.
A little sexual tension of unrequited love of some sort. That's interesting. That's interesting.
So we've got a couple of these things that we can go through. So the first one is that Tony dies. This is the first theory. So let's talk about this a little bit, because I think we're both under the same understanding that Tony did get killed by the guy at 3:00 in the members only jacket.
Yeah.
And I think there's even things in that scene that are kind of flashbacks to everything that happened in the series, all the different people walking in and everything like that.
Yeah.
There's one thing that we know about the Bobby, and you probably don't even hear it when it happens, kind of thing. But there's one thing I'm wondering that I picked up on, I'm wondering if you picked up on, is in Sopranos home movies, there's like a dinging of a bell on a dock. Yeah. And I matched that to the dinging of the bell at the diner, because it's the Soprano home movies episode where they are talking about death and that stuff. So it matches up together.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't really sure what that meant, but I knew there was a connection there.
But it actually also relates to, I think it's Mayhem, where Tony gets out of the hospital and Janice is wheeling him out, and then he hears church bells and looks to a church, and this girl that looks like Meadows coming down the steps as well. And I think that's where the bell thing begins, and then it repeats in the Sopranos home movies, and then it concludes in Made in America. That's the impression I got, that it was kind of like he heard these bells, as in, and he grabs, that's where he first grabs Janice's hand. He says, "Every day is a gift." And then when it repeats in Soprano home movies, that's like the end of that "every day is a gift" shit that he was, getting into, where you can tell he's just like, he's lost any sense of wanting to look at life as being a precious thing to him. And he's just got this sour look on his face, and he's hearing, he just got beat up by Bobby, and he's got his mind bent on this revenge and bringing up the worst of himself, which concludes then, I think, in Holstein's Diner.
Tony sees a light multiple times.
Yeah.
On his hospital gurney, when he's like laying on the gurney and looking up. I think when he's doing shrooms,
the lighthouse
in that dream, when he's Kevin Finnerty looking out his window.
Yeah.
And then when he's
Just
doing
the-
peyote in the thing, and he finally says, I get it.
Well, he also sees when he pukes in the washroom when he's taking peyote, and he looks
And he
up, and he
focuses on
stares
the
at that
light
bright
there
light.
too.
Yeah.
So is that just him seeing the light at the end of the tunnel? And does he realize he's gonna die and everything comes to the end? Is that what I get it means?
I think it's just starting to play with the idea that like he's getting to the end, that there's, you know, that the light is that he's headed toward that, because he definitely, you know, you could also match cut it with almost the you know, the white light symbolizing more of a heavenly death. And then I believe it cuts directly from that to the casino, and we get the shots of like the devil on the casino
Slot machine.
on slot machines. Yeah. So I mean, it kind of could be like a heaven and hell sort of idea there. And then, but they repeat it so well with the headlights in Kennedy and Heidi after when he's choking out Christopher, and the headlights go by in the same way that the lighthouse does, right. Where it's just like, this is all, it's all kind of like starting to come together for him symbolically, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's just the hauntedness is starting to like pick up pace, and it's starting to like to catch up with him.
Yeah, it's almost like us having deja vu a little bit, like something you're like, oh geez, that.
Yeah. And there's of course no way to like do anything about your impending death, and you wouldn't pay attention to it, but just the idea that like as you got closer to death, yeah, if you start experiencing more and more deja vu or something like that, or you do almost symbolically as a viewer, where it just like, you know, the first time I watched Kennedy and Heidi, I wasn't like, oh, the lighthouse, but maybe subconsciously I was, and it gave me a little bit of a shiver. It gave me a little bit of like, oh, weird. Whereas now I think, you know, I'm much better trained as a viewer. And I think if I saw that now, I would probably start to relate it, especially if I saw, I mean, they're hard to find series that are as symbol heavy as the Sopranos. It's almost singular in that position. But I think I'm much better at like paying much greater attention to a film if it's got all these things going on in it.
Mm-hmm. And then the rewatchability value too.
Definitely. Like,
where you pick it up even more. That's the best part.
Yeah, the gladiator stuff in season 4 with Ralphie, where he's just kind of like going for this, you know, keeps mentioning gladiator over and over and over again, and then just like, you know, and Tony even says to him when he gets capo, he's like, "Be careful what you wish for, you might just get it." And like he's like, "Yeah, gladiator's best, oh gladiators," and then he gets it. There you go, you get a gladiator match at the end of your life. Your last moment was get to have the gladiator match. How'd you like it? Is it enjoyable? That your brains are being washed off with bleach off your kitchen floor.
And the members only guy, the interesting thing now on the fan theories thing and on Talking Sopranos, someone said that, oh, that guy, something to do with Eugene. The only thing to do with Eugene is that the guy there is just a low level guy in the mob like Eugene was. And he's a guy who wears similar wardrobe, like a members only jacket.
Yeah, like his haircut's a little like him. He's clean shaven, but got his hair pushed back. But I mean, you could say that about a lot of characters, I think, you know, especially of that age group who are in the mob. They probably look a lot like that. But I mean, there are things that tip off to Eugene. Yeah. I mean, considering like Eugene's paralleled in him, that like he was trying to get out and Tony wouldn't let him. And then Tony wanted to get out, and then Tony wouldn't let himself get out. So like, you know, there's so few things that are repeated in that series that really are built up in the same way. Like there's almost no flashbacks to anything in the past. And the fact that they repeated that Bobby part that we were talking about before, like that to me tips off as soon as you rewatch the series, like, oh, they do that so few times do they do that like it must mean something. It must be super important to it that they would remind you visually with a flashback. I think one of the only times they did it in the series was with, I guess that flashback to Tracy walking through the bank when he sees his daughter holding the bread, and she gave him banana bread. There's probably a couple more parts, but they're very few and far between. But the members only thing, yeah, like it's, you know, it was the title of an episode. Yeah, you know, there's so many little things that they would not.
One thing I was thinking about that
without meaning.
One thing about the members only is that, yeah, Eugene's wearing that jacket. He goes in and he shoots some guy in like Boston or something. He had to go out of town to do it. And when he does that, he walks in, he stands in line, he looks over at the guy, kind of gauges the scene, then goes over and pops him. And I think the guy in the final episode was also going to do that, but then saw Tony there with his whole family and was like, oh shit. So he kind of sat down for a second and then
got a read
on washroom. Yeah, kind of like was like, okay, how am I going to do this without killing everyone?
Right.
Because the family's not supposed to get hurt. Then he goes to the washroom. Then he comes out directly at Tony's side
Yes. Yeah.
You know, for a direct hit, and then he just would drop the gun and leave and exit. Because people were questioning, why does he sit down at the bar like Eugene and
Right.
all those other hitmen?
Yeah.
Everyone else just runs in and shoots. But yeah,
like
I think
even,
you need to get a
like even just recently in The Irishman, you know what I mean? There's a scene where he shoots some main mob dude, and he comes in, gets a read on the thing, gets in line, turns around, and does the deed. So it's like, well, this is as good a chance as any. You know what I mean? I think that's just kind of like, it's probably standard hitman stuff. It's just like, go in, get a read, but don't wait too long. Don't let yourself be noticed too much. You don't want people remembering your face, and then do the deed. So yeah, I don't know. That seems to me to be is that a contention? I mean, I guess
I think people are just trying to come up with ways that he could be alive.
Right. Trying to find excuses.
Which leads us to our next conspiracy theory. It says Patsy Parisi had Tony killed. I'm not going to really go into like the paragraph of why, because me and you know enough about it of like why things would or would not make sense. And this doesn't make sense to me. I think Tony was just killed by New York. I think he was possibly killed by someone maybe who didn't get the message or something, like it didn't go down in time.
This is one thing I wanted to ask you is like, how do you feel about, because like Patsy Parisi, I don't really buy. He was on the up and up. I don't really see him. I mean, he had reason to, but I mean, that kind of got squashed back in, season
with
4
Meadow and his son getting married. Yeah, he was on the up and up, like you said. Things were good. So
that's a good point. He's not going to want to knock off that. It didn't seem like he was in line to do that. However, I did want to ask you, like, what do you think of the idea that Paulie not did it, but like gave them the information to, or tipped them off, considering like so much of that last season was about contentious problems with Paulie and kind of like how Tony doesn't really feel like Paulie should be around anymore. He's always been a bit of a liability. He doesn't make that much money. And then there's always that one shot that gave me kind of shivers, where he's putting up garbage bags in the Blue Comet in Tony's house with Tony. They're getting the family out of there. And then he walks to the kitchen. There's just this one shot of Tony, he's got his hands together and whatnot. There's a shot of Paulie, and he just has this look and follows Tony in. He just gets this like really, that darkness that comes over Paulie, the real Paulie that's there when he's putting away his false persona. That always stayed with me, where I was just like, oh, Paulie's not like, okay. Paulie's not, he's not like down. He's not as loyal to Tony as he would like Tony to believe, even after that whole debacle with getting used by Johnny Sack. So what do you think of that? Do you put any stock in that?
I think I could find something to believe in there, because that's actually one of the theories from another site that I pulled up. It says Paulie is a mole for New York, which obviously he was, but unwittingly for a long time.
Unwittingly, yeah.
But I don't know if this could be the final
like Johnny
thing.
Sack's gone. You know what I mean? He's dead. So Paulie, it's not like Paulie would have the same animosity towards working. He wouldn't feel so used. He might be like, oh, this is kind of like my time.
Oh, Carmine and Paul and Johnny Sack are both gone, so Paulie could
exactly
weasel in there. He is, I would say, Tony's last best friend at that point, right?
Yeah, oh yeah, and he's almost
like more so than Sil and more so than Bobby.
Well, yeah,
I think Paulie's his closest, just because the dad connection and everything.
Well, of his old crew, of Tony's like old crew that he was close with. Yeah, I think Paulie's the only one that was there. Sil,
and it's always your best friend who betrays you, right? So it could potentially be Paulie.
Have you ever seen the video? There's a video on YouTube. Have you ever seen the video or heard the theory about the scissors? Because it relates to Paulie.
No.
Okay, I really thought this was interesting, and it really plays up on one of these small, like the Sopranos is about so many things. And since it's very much about Italian culture, one of the things about Italian culture is the superstition. Oh, and it's mentioned. So when is it Meadow? No, it's Adriana's having like a bridal shower, and she goes to cut the package someone gives her, and Rosalie goes, "No scissors! It breaks it. It's supposed to ruin the friendship."
Mm-hmm.
And then there is a buildup of that idea where scissors are mentioned again in reference of being deadly when Tony tells Christopher that he's got the Italians are coming over. I need you to get them a couple scissors to do this job. And I think there's a couple more mentions, but it kind of climaxes with Paulie bringing in, after all the deeds are done, a box of scissors.
Barber scissors.
Like, I got barber scissors.
Yeah.
And he's just suddenly got this box of scissors, and they related it back to Butchie's got that place that they were meeting, the salon that they were meeting in. to discuss the hits on Tony, Sil, and Bobby.
Oh.
And there's a shot. They're just having a conversation. So someone's got, owns that place or has like an investment in it. Somebody they've what's it called?
So they gave him a box of scissors when he left, and it turned out to be a clue.
Yeah, and then there's a weird shot. And this is the nice thing about The Sopranos is that every shot means something. When they're done discussing it, there's a shot of Butchie just putting stuff away in the salon as if he knows his way around the place, which means it's probably his thing. And they would get barber scissors in. It's a small detail. It's never really followed through. But as far as like theories go, I was like, that's very interesting. And that's the kind of thing that I think they would do, because they've taken time out to set the scissors thing, to repeat it a couple times, and scissors being the end of the friendship or being symbolic of that. I think there's even a moment where Richie mentions it too in season 2, where he's like, barber scissors and stuff. No one knows how much they cost, but everyone needs a pair or something like that. I don't know. It might have been in reference to coolers, because they've got coolers at one point, but I think he says something about scissors as well, which I don't know if the idea had been that thought out or worked on at that point, or process for where it fit in the series. But I always thought that was really interesting, and it would make sense. I mean, Paulie's always been a snake.
This is the next conspiracy theory, that Tony lives, and I just don't buy it. Yeah, I don't buy it. Everything kind of adds up to me in the ending with all those connections.
I gotta agree with that. Like it's so heavy, and the fact that so many times post ending, David Chase says it's all there.
Oh,
like if it's all there and he lives, like then what's there? Like what, he lives? Like he was living the whole time. Like if it was all there, I don't see how that connects. But once you say it's all there, then you go through and you're like, oh, this whole series is clearly about death. Clearly, and David Chase is obsessed with death. Obsessed. He said it himself in interviews. And like once you go back and watch it, like, oh my God, yeah. He is just like obsessed with the concept, obsessed with both probably enthralled and afraid of it, and just the power of it and the mystery of it. And it really, people wouldn't respect this as being the high art that it is, and unless it was about death. I always felt that way. And I've heard Cormac McCarthy say that about writing, that just, if it's not about death at its core, that it's not the highest literature that you can possibly achieve, because it is the ultimate mystery, especially because that's a topic that almost nobody the HBO kind of golden era there in the early 2000s, nobody really embraced death. You know what I mean? Especially in TV. Like TV was so much about just, even if you had a murder of the week on a cop show, you didn't dwell on the murder. You moved on. It was about solving it, moving on to the next murder. So, I mean, it was about death in kind of a perfunctory way, where it was just like, well, this is just a thing we use to have something happen. Whereas Sopranos dwelt on it. It was the main thrust of it. There were lots of funerals. They talked about it. They talked about losing people and what happens afterwards, and their fear of it, and people not wanting to die. And these people who doled out death all the time, suddenly faced with their own mortality and what that would mean. And like David Chase really pressed on that, and like cancer and the suffering of people, and Junior's story of just this guy who just kind of lost everything and just lost his mind, lost his memory, and was just a shell. Like that happens all the time. No one likes talking about that sort of stuff. Few people, no one wants to see a story about like what real dementia looks like, and the slow dwindling of like your grip on yourself and your identity.
These ones are brutal in my opinion. So one says Vin Makazian is Peter McAllister. And that's just like, well, it's like what? It's like,
who's Peter McAllister?
It's just it's played by the same actor. So people are trying
from Home Alone.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yes, I believe that one. Having just heard it and not knowing any of the evidence for it, I actually really buy
that. We don't even need to spend any time on that.
No, hold on. That's not a joke. Does anyone actually have evidence for that?
It's on this screen. I don't think there's any evidence. I think
well, like people... when you think about Home Alone, they have this giant house. This was like such a classic early 90s John Hughes sort of scene. Like Uncle Buck. Have you seen that recently? I just caught it with my uncle, and like it's appropriate for watching Uncle Buck with your uncle. But like everyone in those John Hughes films just has this giant Chicago mansion. For
it does say that.
People.
It says
Vin is described as a family man, and that Peter's source of incredible wealth remains unexplained.
Right. I like the idea that Peter McAllister went from that to losing everything, becoming a cop, losing everything, losing the house, losing the kids, and killing himself. And now we're all alone. Not the home isn't just alone anymore.
So the next one, oh God. So the next one is Lillehammer is Silvio's coma dream.
Oh, that's cool. That's interesting.
You ever watch Lillehammer?
I watched the first little bit of it, but the tone was just awful. Wasn't into.
Yeah, I think the first episode or two.
Yeah. I think I may have got through the first episode. I thought it just wasn't for me. I think we're kind of similar in that, like, I'm very picky about what I watch. I am not a big, like, watch every season on streaming services sort of person. Like, I just zero in on the stuff that I like, and then I really like it. Like, I watch it 6 or 7 times. I learn everything I can from it. And I become kind of not obsessed with it, but I incorporate it into my being. I want to learn everything from it, but I choose those things very selectively. And Lillehammer, I think it's still on though, isn't it? I always liked the idea. I hadn't heard anyone else mention it, that Sil would be in his own version of whatever Tony experienced in his coma. That Sil was now having that, and I always thought that was a cool thing. And I always loved that mirrored shot of each of those two guys taking the other's hand while they were in a coma. The only probably really affectionate thing that they had ever shown for one another was while the other one didn't know it was happening. But I thought that was like a really great thing, because there's so few actual friendships in the Sopranos, but people who genuinely like each other and are genuinely loyal. Like, it's, as viewers, you really get something out of seeing that, because you like to believe that about you and your relationships and what loyalty means, what friendship means, especially in a place like the Sopranos where nobody's actually friends with one another. They all kind of hate each other, at least in the mob.
Kind of touched on it briefly, was who was Tony's most loyal friend. Now, I did think it was Paulie until you kind of said that, but also had Artie.
Yeah. Who, sorry? Artie?
Yeah. Because Artie was, no matter what, like all of Tony's flaws and everything, Artie never sold him out. And he was the only person to actually ever call him on his shit.
Yeah. He's the only person who's ever pointed a gun at Tony and lived. He always gets a pass from stuff. Artie definitely does get a pass from just about all of his infractions against the mob. Even when they throw him out of the Bing, when he's getting too like, oh, we got to do something about this coach. Like, he always gets a pass from stuff. The stuff with Benny, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I got to give it to Sil, because Sil's killed for Tony. Like, Sil kills Bert without Tony's permission. With that would never happen. That Sil would kill.
Is that just business though?
No, that's just to keep the house secure, as Tony says in season 1. Like, he's got to. The more they have people that are like on board, because like Bert would have approached. I mean, he says it, but Bert would have approached Sil, being like, "Hey, listen," and he says, the guys are getting squeezed towards new management. And to like send a bit of a message to the rest of the crew, being like, no, we're sticking with Tony.
Oh,
and the fact that he would kill another made guy without A, at all, and B, without Tony's say so, is like a huge deal, right? That's massive. You don't let alone hit a guy, let alone kill another guy without the boss's permission.
Oh,
so I mean, Sil did that out of a huge amount of loyalty.
Oh,
and Sil's, I got to give it to Sil. Sil's way, and the fact that he took his hand and everything. Paulie is already shown disloyalty massively at the end of season 3 and through all of season 4, and suffered for it. And I think Paulie told them where they were going to be that night, and probably was the person to tip New York off, if anyone was.
That's an interesting theory. I'm going to keep my eyes out open for that theory.
Yeah. Watch that scissors thing, because like I buy that, because I think they would take I think it would interest the writers to take Italian superstitions and then see them throughout the series. I think that would just be a joy to them. That's in the same way it was a joy to be like, okay, listen, we're never going to mention that Richie is gay, but every opportunity you have, put it in there in the language, whatever it is, every scene that we have, which is why it's I got a hard on for you. Like, that would make sense to me, that they would have small little storylines, and almost like the writers would be the only ones that knew about it, just to give them some more flavor with which to write. I can see that definitely being in there. But yeah, I'll give it to Artie as well. Although I feel like Artie at the end really kind of had grown out of Tony. He saw the errors of his ways, leaving Charmaine, who's like so hot, and like to go back to her to renew that marriage. It seemed like he was kind of done with the whole thing, and that because Artie's really us, right? He's the way that we wish we could be, friends with mobsters, tough when we want to be. You know what I mean? We go get our money back and whatnot, and just show that like, no, you're not of that world. You couldn't do that. You know, you should just be happy with what you have. You got a successful world in America, a successful business in America. Just stick with that. Don't get involved in this crap.
Jean-Paul, qu'est-ce que c'est?
Jean-Philippe. Yeah.
Jean-Philippe.
Yeah. Qu'est-ce que c'est like? Yeah.
Well,
Gets
money?
his earring ripped out.
Here's one that I could buy into is that Ralphie was trying to kill Jackie Jr. I don't really know what they mean here. Trying to kill him, it's more like sending him down a bad path, knowing that he's going to get killed by doing this. So was it intentional?
But what would he stand to gain from Jackie dying? I think he didn't do anything to stop him, but I mean, I don't know if he sent him down a path. What would he stand to gain?
It was giving him. It was giving him ideas on ways to ruin his life, his own life, but he didn't he wasn't planning on doing it. Like he gives him the gun, he tells him, "Hey, I'll get you whatever you want." Like,
but that's to me, that's their job. Like, remember in season 4, start of season 4, Tony goes to him. He's like, "There's no money," and he's got all the capos there, and he's like, "Go out and make some fucking earners out there." What he was doing, Jackie, is making an earner. You say, "Listen, you need guns, you need anything, go do jobs." And what always stuck with me too is Richie. When those two idiots go to see him, he's always like, "Let me know if there's anything you can do for me."
Mm-hmm.
Which just, this is how you make earners. You're like, yeah, go rob a store. Like if you get caught, it doesn't mean anything to me, but you're going to pay up to me so that you can start to earn points in my crew and become a part of the crew. That's how this thing works. So to him, it's just like, well, that's how you make, if you find someone ambitious who wants to go knock off a Jewel concert, which I always, the idea, I'm sure that started as a pun. That it was a jewel robbery, a jewel heist. I think that's such a funny idea that they're like, yeah, it's Jewel.
Well, they're so dumb and they always mix up so many words on purpose, especially in the writing. They're always calling things from pop culture wrong. So the mobsters could have got confused in their information.
About jewel heist?
Yeah.
I just think that's a pun. I think the writers put that in there just to be funny. Yeah, it's a jewel heist. They robbed a Jewel concert. Like, I think that's just such a little probably in joke for them.
So Ralphie was just more of an enabler rather than actually actively trying to kill.
Totally. I can't. Well, what would he gain? He's a low-level kid. It only ruined his relationship with Rosalie because he doesn't like, I love when she's like, "You can comfort me." He's like, "What's in it for me?" It's such a classic. It's the pinnacle of selfishness. But yeah, that would just be a pain in the butt. You know what I mean? He knew he'd probably catch shit from Tony. You know what I mean? It came to pass anyway that he was trying to get him killed. And what happened? Where he's just like, now I got to deal with Rosalie in her morning. I got to get out of here. Tony's on my back about this.
Right, that's hilarious.
Have to make the decision to kill him. So I don't buy it. Cute though. Not as cute as Peter McAllister.
Oh! Janice was in a cult. So apparently everyone's obsessed with some idea that 20 years ago, Janice was in a cult in California. Because the timelines add up or something, or a cult in Oregon.
Not like a Manson cult. What are they? They don't say.
Let's see here.
She was in an ashram. She said. I think she was into Hindu. I think she got into Hinduism.
Rajneeshpuram cult. Rajneeshpuram. Based out of Oregon in the 80s.
Okay.
It says both the timeline and location match up perfectly. It doesn't mean that she was necessarily in it, whether she was or she's not. If she's one of these kind of like hippie child, it's like she just is who she is. That being in that cult didn't affect her any more than who she already was as the character.
Yeah, no. And like, well, and this is the thing. David Chay's kind of obsessed with that idea of these people that go on a spiritual quest and to find themselves. Have you ever seen, I tracked it down, the one of the episodes that he wrote of detective show, Rockford Files. One of the episodes he wrote, it was about this woman who was obsessed with spirituality and kind of went from like cultish thinking to cultish thinking, looking for spirituality. And there's some great lines in it where Rockford's just like, there's no quickie nirvana. You have to go through, you can't just like jump on something and have spiritual enlightenment. And if you watch that episode, a lot of the same ideas are carried into Janice. Janice is pretty much that character as well. He just liked the idea of someone that escaped this, hellish environment with this crazy mom, father who is abusive and violent and in the mob, and then finally got sucked back into it. And that she used her spirituality just as like another clip of ammunition to throw at people and to act like she's better than them and to dodge her responsibilities, like Harpo.
I'd have to look into what this cult did. Exactly. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if she was a part of some cult, but like, that's not part of this Sopranos story, other than just affecting her hippie background character and why she's kind of nutso.
If you had seen the Rockford episode, that girl that they cast there and that character, she looked like she was in a cult. She had that cultish look where she was always looking for someone to tell her how to feel and what the answers were. Janice isn't like that to me.
No,
Janice
she's the opposite of that. She's a boss.
She's too strong-willed. She's a boss, very strong-willed. She doesn't really listen to anybody. And just whenever it suits her, she just, whenever she wants sympathy, whenever she wants to get something that she's after, she just uses whatever ammunition that she's got. She doesn't got that culty look. She's not looking for someone to tell me or tell her how it is. She knows how it is.
She's looking for handouts.
Yeah. Remember that guy? She's that young guy she's dating? Like, when Livia dies,
she first gets the call,
18-year-old.
Hey baby, how do you like your eggs? Or whatever it says. The mob serves human meat. Seems like a lot of people are obsessed with Sopranos being cannibals or
cannibalistic. Symbolically, I agree with that, but it feels like that's not how they mean that. Yeah, symbolically, absolutely. Like, there are many, many references to basically meat being or murder being symbolically what the mobsters eat, as in they kill someone for money, or they make money off of death, or they kill the Kolar guy and they get those jobs, and they're basically eating what is the result of their murder. Like, what's his face? Episode 1 gets killed on that pig's chopping block, and then probably the most obvious example is Fat Dom. There's a down shot. Our top-down shot of Dom getting killed after he's being stabbed in the kitchen with a cutting knife, and he falls directly onto the table as if he's the next meal
served up.
Served up. And just the fact that they're cutting people up in the pork store, like, it's almost like a belabored symbolism, but it works so well. And then we can talk about some more with this, but I always thought the suckling pigs shot, when they pan back, when they're all standing outside the end of one of the episodes, and it says suckling pigs there when he's talking to the FBI. Well, we can get into that.
Yeah, Tony was working with the government.
Well, in a sense, he was.
Yeah, I think in an indirect way, but not in a direct way, because that's what their whole motivation was for the entire series, was catching him. So if he was working with them, we wouldn't have been seeing all those closed doors meetings of them like trying to figure out how they're going to get him.
Totally, but him at least, him talking to the FBI and agreeing to feed them information, however real the information was. I mean, it's hard to say whether it was, useful to them or not, but the fact that he would talk to them at all, it's kind of verboten. Like, you don't talk to the cops.
Oh!
And one of his main complaints at the start of the series was that, no one, everyone's singing to the police now. Everyone's, talking to the cops. They'll sell each other out and whatnot. And then that he's lamenting this about this bygone era, and then becomes that himself. I think is like a kind of a perfect poetic irony.
In some ways, but his in the least way. Like, basically everyone in his crew ratted on him, or was a rat.
Do they mean that, like, he's been working with the FBI, like almost like what's his face was in The Departed, or The Departed?
Oh yeah, like there's exactly like that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that he was kind of like slowly selling on no way.
No, I know. It says all of his opponents ended up dead or in jail, and he always came out on top, but it's just like,
no way. He was, we saw those scenes with them going after Tony. They said they wanted Tony. There was no way that they would waste time on a guy that they had already caught, that was already cooperating with them. That doesn't make sense. But there is something to the idea that, like, and I read this in one of the books about the Sopranos, like, a soprano is a singer, and singing is singing your, selling out your people to the cops and to the FBI. And at the time I was kind of like, yeah, I guess that's kind of like an interesting take on the Sopranos. But now I'm like, oh yeah, no, that's for sure there. That's for sure.
It's so much also about operatic and an Italian word. It works on so many levels.
Absolutely. It works on so many levels that they wouldn't miss an opportunity to also be like, yeah, and in the end, Tony too becomes someone who informs not on his own.
No matter
crew,
how indirectly.
Yeah, that there is like, oh, he finds terrorism so abhorrent that he's gonna sing on that. And that's definitely, I feel, in there. I would agree with that one.
The last one on this side is Adriana wasn't killed.
Because you never see the death. Is that the thinking?
I think so.
No, she's for sure dead. For sure.
Well, you brought something up to me that a couple women in the series died by crawling away on the ground. Carmaine, who is it? Carmaine Lapuzzo?
Lorraine. Yeah.
And I think she's more season 5 or 6.
Yeah. And she dies off screen as well.
She's crawling away.
It's almost the same shot. Crawling away on her hands and knees, which makes more sense for Adriana with the whole cat thing later on. But I think they mentioned it too. I think I heard David Chase mention it. It's just like, oh, why didn't you show her getting killed? And he's like, it's almost like sexism that they just didn't have the heart to do it. They didn't have the heart to see, Adriana Lacerva's brains spread across the leaves. I kind of buy that. It was almost more of a mercy that we didn't have to see that. See a character that was so kind of like innocent and so loving get smoked in the woods. I think they just wanted to turn the camera away out of almost respect to the character or something. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but like alive, that doesn't track at all. Why would Silvio keep her alive?
So here's one. It says the orange cat is a ghost. So we do think that, right?
Not a ghost, but it's just symbolic. It's symbolic of Adriana. Yeah, and this is my favorite thing about The Sopranos, and what I think it really separates it from all other pretenders to its throne is that hauntedness that it has. It feels as if there are ghosts everywhere, and in many ways there are. We see, and we almost always see them in mirrors as well. Pussy's ghost we see in a mirror. The Virgin Mary is first spotted in a mirror at the Bing, and that haunted feeling of things being not like almost verging on supernatural, but just enough pulled back that we never have confirmation of it. And I think the cat's just one of those things. The bear being Tony as well. Like Tony's not the bear. The bear isn't a ghost, but it's symbolic of Tony. It's almost his animus is around, even if he isn't around. In the same way that you can kill off Adriana, but her animus or animalness or spirit, whatever you want to say, is not reincarnated, but maybe we could say even reincarnated. I wouldn't put it past.
Yeah, I could believe reincarnated.
David Chase, he's interested in Hinduism, I'd say, at least some portion. That's certainly Buddhism. And karma is all about reincarnation.
That's a good one to end it on.
Yep.
We got some good ideas for future, and we'll do more focused episodes on some of these things we come up with next time too. But I think this was a good one just to get us rolling.
I'll start writing down some of the symbols and some of the stuff that I've thought about quite a bit. I had a really good a giant post I made on YouTube at one point to a guy where he was like, oh, what kind of symbols do you mean? I wrote a whole thing on the pool. And since writing that, I've had even more thoughts about the pool and about water and whatnot. So, I mean, that's a huge part. We can talk about that for a good little while.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay,
so it's been big Ziti, maybe lost the title.
Episode of Big Z. Oh!
If people knew how to pronounce it, we could just be, oh! But oh!
That's what I wanted it to be. Oh! Oh!